Okay, here's my warm-up for 9.6. I'm going to graph a tangent function. So let's start with the amplitude. We're going to get the amplitude from the coefficient that's in front of tangent there. So that's going to be 2. Okay, that's my amplitude. The period is going to come from the coefficient that's in this area between the tangent and the theta. So that's going to be a 2 again. But that's not the period, that's the k value. The k value is 2. That's going to lead me to the period. So the period for tangent is going to come from this little equation. It's pi over k, so it's pi over whatever that coefficient is. If it were sine or cosine, it'd be 2 pi over k, but for a tangent, it's going to be pi over k. So here I've got pi over 2, and that's simplified, right? I can't do anything else with pi over 2. All right, vertical shift is going to come from this bit on the end. So you could say that the vertical shift is -1. I like to say down 1 because that's what's going to happen. My whole tangent graph is going to come down 1. And then the last piece is the phase shift that's going to come from the contents of the parentheses there. Okay, so the phase shift, what I want to do is take the contents of the parentheses, set it equal to 0. And then solve for theta. So I'm going to add pi over 8 to both sides. Okay, and then that's my phase shift. So since this is positive, phase shift is shifting left and right. It's like a horizontal shift. So when it's positive, it's going to go to the right. If it were negative, it would go to the left. So this is going to go right pi over 8 units. You could just say pi over 8, but I'm just putting right in there so I remember which way to shift it. Okay. All right, so let's start graphing. So I'm going to start with getting my ghost in the right place. So that's what I call the. I like to graph a tangent curve without the phase shift. So I kind of think what this will look like without the phase shift first, and then I'm going to move it left to right, because that's the trickiest part is figuring out how far to move it left or right. Okay, so I would usually do a road map with sine or cosine. It's going to get a little messy here when I do that. But what I would do is start with the vertical shift, so down 1. So very lightly, I'm going to make a kind of, that's going to be my midline right there. Okay. And then I'll use the amplitude. I'm going to go up and down 2 units from that. So very lightly, I'm going up and down 2 units from the midline. So hopefully you can see that a little bit. Okay, I did that very lightly because it's going to get too messy if I draw those in dark. Okay, so now that I got that road map in place, I'm going to draw my ghost. So you've got to know what the parent graph for tangent looks like. So the parent graph for tangent, you'd have a point right on the origin, but I'm going to put mine on my midline here so it stays on the road map. And I'm doing this lightly too because I'm going to end up shifting this. Okay, so there is a point, and then I'm going to have a point up there at the top and a point here, and then I'm going to have some asymptotes on either side of this. So there's going to be asymptotes like this, the next tick over to the left and right, and I'm going to get an S-curve something like this. Okay, so that's what my parent graph looks like. All right, so I'm going to be shifting this to the right, pi over 8, but I don't know what pi over 8 means on this graph yet. Okay, I know my y-axis, the scale is 1. I always leave the y-axis scale as 1, but my theta axis, I'm going to have to change that. Okay, so each tick is not going to be 1 unit. So we're going to use the period now. So the period is pi over 2. The period, remember, is the length of one cycle. So this is going to be pi over 2 from that left asymptote to the right one. Okay, but this graph is centered on the y-axis, so only half of my graph is my cycle is going to be to the right of the y-axis. What I like to do is just take the 4th tick out, and that's always going to correspond to the period. So that 4th tick is going to be pi over 2, and I'll show you that this is going to work out. Okay, if the 4th tick is pi over 2, well, the 2nd tick is halfway to that. So half of pi over 2 would be pi over 4, right? You can multiply by 1/2 there, and that'll give you pi over 4. And then halfway to pi over 4 is going to be pi over 8. So the first tick's halfway to the second tick. Okay, now I know each tick on here is pi over 8, so I can count out pi. This would be 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8 would reduce to that, right? This would be 3 pi over 8, and then 4 pi over 8 would reduce to pi over halves, and I could do the negative versions going to the left, okay? But this makes sense now if you think about this, because this bit here takes up pi over 4, but then the left half of my ghost is going to take up another pi over 4, right? So pi over 4 plus pi over 4 would be pi over 2, and pi over 2 is my period, okay? So now I'm looking at the phase shift. I'm going right pi over 8, and now I know that pi over 8 is 1 tick. So this is going right 1 tick on my graph, okay? So I'm going to take everything, and I'm going to go ahead and label this point here. This would be negative pi over 8. Okay, so I'm going to take this whole blue curve that I have and shift everything to the right. I like to just start with that left asymptote. So that left asymptote is going to end up right here. Okay, and then this point will go here, this point would go here, and this point would go here. And you need the asymptotes in here. They're part of the graph. And there we go, okay? And I like to always have my students label the where your cycle starts and ends at a minimum. So I want to label where the two asymptotes are. And I already have that on there because I've already done that, okay? And now it says find the coordinates of the critical points from the previous problem. Well, I've got 3 critical points here. So let me just label them A, B, and C. Okay, and I've got all of the theta axis places marked. Let's label the places on the road map here. So this bottom point is at negative, this bottom line is at -3, this would be at -1 here, and this is at +1, okay? All right, so point A, I'm at 0, -3. B, we're going to be 1 tick to the right, 1 tick down. Well, 1 tick to the right is pi over 8, so I'm going pi over 8 to the right, 1 down. And then point C, we're going 2 ticks to the right, which is pi over 4, so pi over 4 to the right, 1 up. Okay, and there we go. That is the end of the warm-up, and I will see you next time.